My name is Heather Jordan, and I am 34 years old. I used to think I understood the quiet rhythms of my own life, how the walls of my home carried the sound of my footsteps, how the kitchen light fell in warm gold every morning, how my husband's voice filled the spaces between the hours. I believed stability was something I had earned, something I had built with careful hands. I never imagined that beneath that stillness cracks were forming delicate at first, then widening inevitable. Julie arrived 2 months ago, trembling from fever and exhaustion, barely able to stand on her own. She was born in 2008, the baby of our family, and in so many ways, she had always been treated like a fragile thing. Something to shield something, to excuse something, to rescue. We weren't particularly close, not since childhood. But when she lost her job and then fell seriously ill due to the West Nile virus, our parents called me, their voices tight with worry. Please, Heather, she has no one else out there. And because doing the right thing had become a habit for me, I told her to move in. I didn't see it as a favor. I saw it as duty, as instinct, and honestly, I could afford it. She needed stability, a roof, a warm place to heal. I thought that was enough. For a while it was. But even in those early weeks, there were moments, small, quiet, almost imperceptible, that pricked at me. Julie lingering too long in the kitchen, giving my husband strange little half-smiles. My husband looking away quickly, his face unreadable. A certain energy in the house that felt off, like a low hum behind the walls. I ignored it. People heal at different paces, I told myself. She just needs time. But of course, time wasn't what she was taking. It was everything else. 2 days ago, Julie asked both of us to sit with her in the living room. She spoke softly, her fingers twisting together. I assumed she was finally ready to tell us she was rejoining the workforce, or maybe moving out now that her strength had returned. I even felt a small wave of relief, maybe the worst was over. Instead, she lifted her chin, looked directly at me, and told me she had been sleeping with my husband. Just like that, delivered with the softness of someone discussing a mild inconvenience. For a moment, my mind simply refused to process it. The room felt too still, too silent, as if time itself had inhaled sharply. Then she said the words that cracked the floor beneath me. She was pregnant. With my husband's baby. I turned to him, needing confirmation or denial, anything. What I saw was shock. True, raw shock, etched across his face. His eyes were wide, not with guilt, but with complete confusion. It was the first moment I understood Julie had not told him she was planning to tell me this way. She had ambushed both of us. She kept talking something about being sorry, something about understanding how upsetting this must be. But what's done is done, she said, and now she was expecting. Then her voice sharpened. She said she would really appreciate it if I vacated the house, my house, because she didn't want to feel uncomfortable during her pregnancy. She spoke as if she were the homeowner, as if she were the wife, as if I were the one who didn't belong. Inside me, something cold solidified. I felt my heartbeat slow, not speed up. I felt my hands relax, not clench. I realized in that moment that rage isn't always loud. Sometimes it is quiet, still like a blade. My voice, when I finally used it, was steady. I told her that this was my house, my property purchased long before she or my husband had any claim to anything. And if anyone was leaving, it would be her and him. They could play their little fantasy of happy family somewhere far away from me, because I would be filing for divorce. She stared at me stunned. She laughed once because she thought I was joking. Then she realized I wasn't. My husband finally spoke, voice low, shame, dragging down each word as he told Julie that he had lied to her. He was a stay-at-home husband, always had been. He didn't own anything. He didn't finance anything. He wasn't the secret literary millionaire she had apparently believed he was. The room shifted then. Julie's smile vanished, replaced with rage. She called him a scammer, a liar. She began to unravel her voice, rising tears forming panic taking root. The spectacle was almost surreal. She had stolen my husband, betrayed my trust, and now discovered he wasn't the golden ticket she expected. Watching them yell at each other should have been satisfying. It wasn't. It felt like watching strangers destroy the last illusions I had held on to. Their shouting echoed through the living room, but my mind drifted elsewhere to the quiet moments before all of this. The mornings when I thought I knew the man beside me. The weekends when I believed I truly understood the meaning of partnership. The years I spent building a life I thought was stable. Now it felt like everything was made of glass, and Julie had thrown the first stone. I forced myself back into the moment and told them both to get out of my house. Now, not later, not after packing, not after explanations. Now. Julie's panic escalated. She dropped to her knees, begging, insisting she would fix it, insisting I couldn't kick out a pregnant woman who was family. Family. She said the word like it still meant something. It was the last straw. She had crossed a line so deep it might as well have been carved into bone. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I simply acted. I grabbed her arm roughly, I'll admit, and walked her to the door. She stumbled, whimpering, pleading. Then I pushed her out. Her gasp echoed behind me as I shut the door. My hands trembled only after the latch clicked into place. A moment later, I walked to the guest room, the room she had lived in while betraying me, and began stuffing everything she owned into bags. Clothes chargers, medicine bottles, cosmetics. I didn't care what ended up where. The bags were at the door within minutes. I threw them outside with her and told her she had two choices: leave or meet the police. Behind me, my husband stood motionless, shame sinking into him like a stone swallowed by deep water. He packed quietly. He didn't argue. He didn't beg. He didn't even try to defend himself. He left with a single apology I pretended not to hear. Julie continued crying on the porch for nearly an hour, her sobs drifting through the door like distant thunder. I put on headphones. I refused to let her tears soften me. Betrayal doesn't deserve a soft landing. When the porch finally fell silent, the house felt cavernous, too big, too quiet, too empty. The walls that once held warmth now held only echoes. That night I called my lawyer. My voice didn't shake, not until after I hung up. Because the truth was sinking in, and it would hurt more than anything they had done to me in that living room. The destruction of a marriage doesn't happen in one moment. It happens in every moment after, when you realize the person you loved never existed in the way you believed. And as I lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling, I realized something else. This was only the beginning. The real fractures within my family, within my past, within myself, had only started to show. The morning after everything imploded felt strangely quiet, as if the world had paused to watch me pick up whatever pieces remained of my life. But there were no pieces. Not really. Just dust, just echoes, just the hollow space where trust used to live. I woke up on the couch, still in yesterday's clothes, my head heavy from a night of barely any sleep. The house felt wrong without the usual sounds, my husband's footsteps. Julie's soft coughing from down the hall, the clatter of someone in the kitchen. Now it was nothing. Just silence. A cold silence that seemed to press against my chest. I made coffee because that's what people do when their world collapses, they cling to routine. But the taste was off bitter in a way that had nothing to do with the beans. I couldn't shake the image of Julie kneeling on my porch, sobbing hysterically, or the way my husband wouldn't look at me as he walked out. There was no closure in any of it, just rupture. By mid-morning, the dread in my stomach felt like a storm gathering. And right on cue it struck. My phone buzzed. Mom. I stared at the screen for a full 10 seconds. Then I answered against my better judgment. Heather, she said before I could even greet her. Her tone wasn't warm. It wasn't concerned. It was sharp accusatory. What did you do to your sister? My heart dropped. What did I do? The disbelief in my voice was too raw to hide. Mom sighed dramatically, like I was already exhausting her. Julie called us last night sobbing. She's pregnant. She's unstable. She's unemployed. You threw her out, knowing all of that. How could you be so heartless? I almost laughed. The absurdity of it hit me like a slap. She had an affair with my husband, Mom. That was a mistake, she countered. A horrible mistake, yes. But she's family, and she's sick. She needs support right now, not cruelty. I pressed my fingers to my temples. The room felt like it was spinning. Mom, I said slowly. She planned to kick me out of my own home. She told me she was going to raise her baby with my husband, who she seduced while I was helping her recover. Do you hear the insanity in that? Another sigh. Your husband lied to her about everything. He manipulated her. He told her he was wealthy. No, I snapped. He lied out of ego. She believed him because she thought she was trading up. There was a long pause on the line. Then Mom delivered the sentence that carved a new wound I didn't even know I had room for. Well, isn't that what you did when you married him? I froze. Every atom in my body stilled. Mom kept talking, unaware she had just shattered something fundamental between us. You married a man who stayed home while you worked. We all wondered if you were compensating for something. Compensating. As if my self-worth hinged on owning a house. As if I had married beneath me and Julie had simply tried to correct the imbalance. I swallowed hard. So this is my fault now. We're saying you shouldn't throw out a pregnant woman who has nowhere else to go, Mom continued, especially after everything she's been through, especially when she thought she was in a real relationship. My father's voice appeared faintly in the background. Just tell her to let Julie stay. That's the right thing to do. And suddenly I saw it so clearly, the pattern I had missed for years, the constant cushioning of Julie's mistakes, the endless empathy for her chaos, the subtle quiet expectation that I would always be the strong one, the responsible one, the one who bends so she doesn't have to. They weren't defending her because she deserved it. They were defending her because they needed me to clean it up. Again, I'm not doing this, I said flatly. Not this time. Heather. I said no, and then I hung up. For 30 full seconds after ending the call, my hands shook with a mix of anger and heartbreak. I'd always believed my parents were fair, that they treated us equally. But maybe that belief had been another illusion, one I clung to because it was easier than seeing the truth. The bitterness burned through my chest, but there was no time to collapse. I had too much to do, too much to hold together. So I showered, dressed, gathered every legal document I needed, and drove to my lawyer's office. The drive was long enough to give my thoughts too much room. I kept replaying Julie's voice, dripping with self-righteousness. I would really appreciate it if you vacated the house. The sheer entitlement. The nerve. My lawyer listened quietly as I told him everything. Every betrayal, every manipulation, every detail of the disaster. He asked clarifying questions, took notes, and didn't show a flicker of judgment. Somehow, that calm professionalism made everything feel real. When he finally looked up, he said, "We'll file immediately. He's not entitled to anything unless he contests. Given the circumstances, I doubt he will." I nodded, trying to feel something like relief, but all I felt was emptiness. When I returned home that afternoon, the quiet hit harder. The guest room door was open, the bed stripped bare, the air heavy with absence. The home I had built no longer felt like a sanctuary. It felt haunted. Night fell quickly, as if the sky itself didn't want to linger. And as I sat on the couch in the dark, the weight of everything pressed down on me. My sister betrayed me. My husband betrayed me. My parents blamed me. My home was no longer a home. My marriage was collapsing. My family ties were fraying. And yet in the ruins, something unexpected flickered a spark of defiance. They wanted me to bend. They wanted me to forgive. They wanted me to take Julie back in. But I wasn't going to. Not this time, not ever again. Because betrayal demands consequences. And the people who hurt you don't get to tell you how to heal. The next few days bled together in a strange haze. I woke up, I went to work, I performed. I smiled when people needed me to. I answered emails. I handled meetings. I managed deadlines. On the surface, I was the same. Heather everyone knew. Calm, capable, unfaltering. But the moment I stepped back inside my house each evening, all the strength drained out of me, like water slipping through broken fingers. The silence felt heavier now. Not peaceful, not stable, just hollow. Sometimes I caught myself listening for the sound of someone in the kitchen or footsteps in the hallway or the soft closing of a bedroom door, only to remember that I had expelled every person who had ever lived under this roof with me. It should have felt empowering. It didn't. Not yet. Instead, grief settled into my bones like cold. One night, I walked into the guest room where Julie had stayed. The bed was still stripped, the dresser empty, the faint scent of her cheap strawberry shampoo lingering like a ghost. For a long moment, I just stood there, arms folded tightly against my chest, trying to understand how someone I barely considered close had been able to wreck my life so thoroughly. There were no answers, just the ache. But the worst wasn't the silence or the memories. The worst was the creeping doubt. Her voice echoed in my head. "You can't kick out a pregnant woman. We're family." And then my parents' voices followed. "She's in between jobs. She was sick. She needs you. You were too rough. You should forgive." I tried to shake it off, remind myself that what she did was unforgivable. But emotional poison doesn't flush out easily. It lingers. It corrodes. And little by little, I started wondering, was I too harsh? Was I too cold? Should I have handled it differently? I hated that those questions even existed. I hated that they found cracks in my resolve and slithered in. But betrayal doesn't just break trust. It rewires you. The day after my parents' call, they tried again. Another call, another voicemail, another attempt to guilt me into taking Julie back. They kept using words like compassion and family bond as if those words hadn't already been weaponized against me. I didn't respond. By the third day, their messages turned sharp. You're being unreasonable. Julie is fragile. You need to reconsider. You owe her empathy. You owe us a conversation. That word owe broke something in me, because I had never owed Julie anything. I had given freely. But in their eyes, giving wasn't kindness. It was obligation. And obligations never end. So I blocked them. Silence immediately replaced the chaos, and yet the quiet didn't comfort me. It only reminded me of how alone I suddenly was. At night, when sleep refused to come, I found myself thinking about my marriage, not the end of it, but the years leading up to this moment. I remembered the early days when my husband's eyes lit up whenever he spoke about writing, when he would stay awake until 3 a.m. drafting scenes he felt proud of. I remembered the nights we spent dreaming about a life built together, me running my business, him finishing his novel, both of us walking forward side by side. But slowly those dreams shifted. The light in his eyes dimmed. The late nights turned into excuses. The passion drained out of him. He stopped showing me his work, stopped talking about progress, stopped celebrating anything. He laughed less, smiled less, engaged less. And somewhere along the way, I stopped noticing how lonely he had become, how lost, how ashamed, how suffocated by his own fears of inadequacy. He didn't say it, but I felt it now looking back at the trail of small ignored clues. The hesitant way he answered when people asked what he did for a living. The long silences when I came home late from work. The way he clung to compliments from others even when small. The way he perked up when someone admired something he said or did. And then Julie had shown up young, vulnerable, naive, easy to impress. She saw him as someone important, someone accomplished, someone bigger than he actually was. And he clung to that fantasy like a lifeline. It didn't excuse anything, but it made the betrayal feel different. Sharper in some ways, sadder in others, like watching someone drown and realizing they were the ones who swam toward the deep end. Every night I stretched out in bed and stared at the empty space beside me, the same space where he once slept, where his warmth used to be. It was astonishing how cold a mattress could feel. I wondered if he was sleeping somewhere unfamiliar. A couch, a guest room, his parents' house. I wondered if he replayed everything in his head, if he regretted it, if he wished he could undo it. And then I wondered something much darker. Was Julie really pregnant? Had she invented it? Or worse, was she pregnant but not with his child? The timing didn't feel right. The story didn't feel right. The way she broke the news felt rehearsed, desperate, calculated. And it gnawed at me like a slow, quiet suspicion that refused to disappear. But I pushed the thought aside. I had enough chaos, enough heartbreak, enough unraveling. I focused instead on what I could control. My work, my divorce, my peace. Winning divorce terms wouldn't undo the hurt, but it would start the process of reclaiming my life. One small piece at a time. By the end of the week, the emotional fracture between me and my parents had widened into a canyon. They sent one last message, one I only saw after unblocking them briefly to check something else. "We're very disappointed in you." I stared at the words for a long time, feeling something inside me tilt, something heavy, something old, something I had depended on without realizing. Their approval, and now it was gone. The fracture wasn't just widening, it was final. And for the first time, I understood. Sometimes the deepest betrayals don't come from the ones who cheat. Sometimes they come from the ones who should have protected you. The divorce papers were filed. The initial shock had faded, and yet the hurt still pulsed beneath everything I did, like a bruise that deepened instead of healing. I wasn't sure what stage of grief I was in anymore. Anger came in waves, numbness followed, and occasionally a sliver of sorrow slipped through. I had become an echo of myself, functional, responsive, but hollowed out. Then, one morning, barely past sunrise, my phone buzzed with a message from a number I had silently hoped would never appear again. My husband. For a long moment, I simply stared at the notification. I should have deleted it without reading. I should have blocked him immediately. But curiosity, or maybe masochism, won out. His message was long, too long, and came in separate bursts, as if he had typed and deleted it 100 times before finally hitting send. "I'm not contesting anything. The terms are fair. I want you to have everything. I'm sorry. I've been trying to think of a way to approach you, but nothing feels adequate. You deserve the truth, even if it hurts." I felt my breath hitch. Then the next message arrived. "I didn't cheat because I stopped loving you. I cheated because I stopped loving myself." I sank into a chair, phone heavy in my trembling hand. He went on explaining the things I had sensed but never fully understood. His shame about being a stay-at-home husband. His fear of disappointing me. His guilt about being financially dependent. His failure to finish the novel he had once been so proud of. How slowly he felt himself shrinking into someone he didn't recognize. I felt useless, like I had nothing to offer you. When Julie admired me, it felt like breathing again. I know how pathetic that sounds. I closed my eyes. It did sound pathetic, but it also sounded painfully human. Still unforgivable, but human. The messages continued. She believed I was successful because I lied, because I stupidly wanted someone to see me as more than a man who couldn't finish a book. I'm not proud of it. I'm ashamed of everything. Tears blurred the screen. I didn't want them to fall, but grief doesn't negotiate. Then the final message arrived. This was the first and last time, I swear that. I know I ruined everything, but if one day, even far in the future, you find it in you to forgive me, I hope you will. I set the phone down and cried quietly at first, then deeply, the kind of crying that empties a person. I cried for the man I thought he was, for the marriage I believed in, for the naive trust I gave freely, for every moment that now felt contaminated. But when the tears dried, clarity returned. He didn't deserve a response. Not now, not ever. So I blocked him finally, fully, irrevocably. And somehow that act felt like closing the last chapter of a book I never wanted to read again. Days passed. The emotional fog thickened and thinned unpredictably. Work became a sanctuary even if I was moving through it half awake. But at home, the quiet got heavier, denser, suffocating in places. I tried to fill it with noise, music, TV, cooking, but grief seeped through all of it. Then the doorbell rang on a Sunday morning. My parents. Of course. They stood on my porch, looking exhausted, anxious, and already irritated. The moment I opened the door, my father's shoulders stiffened like he had prepared for battle. I'm warning you now, I said before they could speak. If you're here to talk about Julie again, I'm not entertaining it. Heather, Mom said, voice trembling with frustration. We didn't fly here to be dismissed. Then you're welcome to leave, I replied calmly, because unless you're here to apologize for how you treated me, this conversation isn't happening. Their faces hardened. Dad's jaw clenched. Mom's brows pinched together. You want us to apologize? Dad asked. After the way you spoke to us? Yes, I said plainly. Because the way you defended Julie after what she did was unacceptable. You shamed me. You called me heartless. You blamed me for her mistakes. And all while I was dealing with the destruction of my marriage. Mom's voice broke. We're trying to fix this family, Heather. No, I snapped, heat finally rising in my chest. You're trying to fix Julie's comfort. You're trying to guilt me into taking responsibility for her life again. But I don't owe her anything. Not safety, not forgiveness, not shelter, not emotional labor. They exchanged glances, frustration turning into something sharper. Dad spoke first, his tone tight. Your sister is pregnant. She is scared and alone. You threw her out onto the street. She threw herself out when she slept with my husband. I shouted the words, erupting before I could stop them. She destroyed my marriage. She tried to take my home. She tried to replace me in my own life. Dad opened his mouth again, but I cut him off. And don't you dare talk to me about family, I said, voice trembling with fury. Because Julie didn't think about family when she climbed into my husband's bed. She didn't think about family when she demanded I leave my own house. She didn't think about family when she wanted to play happy couple with a man who was lying to her. So spare me your lecture. Mom blinked hard, tears forming. Heather, you can't talk to us like this. I can talk to you however I choose in my home, I said coldly, especially after you came here to shame me again for not choosing your favorite child over myself. The words hit harder than I intended and Mom flinched. But I didn't stop. You failed me, I said. You both did. When I needed you, you blamed me. When my life collapsed, you defended the person who caused it. You chose Julie because she always needs saving. And you ignored me because I never do. Mom's tears spilled over. Dad stepped back slightly, his expression hardening, not from anger, but from defeat. Finally, he said quietly, I don't want to speak to you again, Heather. Not until you get your head on straight. Then he turned and walked toward the car. Mom followed slowly, sobbing, pausing only once to look back at me, as if begging me to take the words back. I didn't. The door closed behind me like a final judgment, and my house felt quieter than ever before. Not lonely, not empty. Just mine. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low, I learned from a mutual acquaintance that my husband had moved in with his parents and was planning to leave the state after the divorce finalized. Our mutual friends knew the truth now. Most of them had cut him off. A few remained neutral, but I no longer cared either way. All that mattered was this. My world had completely broken apart. But for the first time, I felt the faintest sense of strength forming in the cracks. I wasn't healed, not even close. But I was done being the one everyone leaned on. Done being responsible for everyone else's comfort. Done accepting pain as the price for peace. Tonight I stood alone. Tomorrow I would stand stronger. The days that followed felt unfamiliar, like I was moving through a world that had the same shape as before, but none of the same meaning. I went to work. I came home. I managed the routines of life, but everything seemed like an echo of what used to be. A version of my life that looked normal from the outside, but felt hollowed out from within. Yet something was shifting quietly, almost imperceptibly. A strange sort of steadiness was forming, not joy, not recovery, but the first fragile layer of emotional scar tissue. Something that held me together when I walked into the house each night and felt the absence of the people who had once filled it. One evening, after coming home from work, I opened the guest room door again. The room was just as empty as the last time I'd stood there, bed stripped. Dresser bare, windows closed. But this time, instead of feeling a heavy ache, a different sensation trickled through me. Relief. It surprised me. This was the room where Julie had lived while betraying me, the place where she hid her secrets, the place where I trusted her to heal while she was quietly ruining my life. And now it was just an empty room again, a blank slate, a space with no ghosts unless I let them stay. I walked inside. I opened the window. Fresh air rushed in, cool and gentle, sweeping across the room like a cleansing breath. For the first time since everything started, I felt the faintest lightness in my chest. Not happiness, not closure, just a moment of unburdened air. But it was enough. Slowly, I began reclaiming my home piece by piece. I cleaned the kitchen until the counters gleamed. I opened all the curtains, letting sunlight spill through every corner. I washed the blankets, rearranged the furniture, replaced old photos with new art, and threw away everything that brought back memories of anyone but myself. It was like I was relearning how to live in my own house. And in the process, I started noticing things I had ignored for years. The faint fertilizer scent from the potted plants near the window, the hum of the refrigerator at night, the warm pattern of sunlight that hit the living room rug around 4 p.m. Little things, ordinary things. But after everything that had unfolded, ordinary felt precious. Healing didn't come in large waves. It came in tiny, delicate drops. Of course, life didn't pause for my healing. It carried on indifferent. I started hearing things through mutual friends, snippets of updates, whispers of gossip, pieces of information filtered through people who didn't want to pick sides but inevitably did. My soon-to-be ex-husband was staying with his parents, trying to keep a low profile. Most of our friends wanted nothing to do with him. The ones who stayed neutral didn't matter much. They weren't people I trusted deeply to begin with. He was planning to move out of state once the divorce finalized. A clean break, a new beginning far from the ruins he created. I felt nothing about that. Not satisfaction, not anger, not grief, just neutrality. It was strange how betrayal could burn so fiercely at first, and then after enough time and reflection cool into something colorless, a scar instead of a wound. Julie, on the other hand, was quiet, suspiciously quiet. No calls, no texts, no messages forwarded from my parents, no updates from anyone. Her silence wasn't peace, it was tension, the kind of quiet that signals the presence of something unresolved. Part of me wondered whether her pregnancy was real, whether she had made it up in a panic to hold on to the fantasy she'd constructed, whether she believed the lie so thoroughly she convinced herself it was truth. But I had no interest in finding out, not anymore. Julie's choices had consequences, and those consequences were hers to carry, not mine. As the weeks passed, the sharpest parts of my grief softened into something more manageable. I still had nights when I cried quietly into my pillow, nights when I hated how much I remembered nights when I wished I could rewind time just to stop myself from ever letting Julie through my door. But I also had moments, brief but clear, when I felt like myself again. Like the time I cooked a dinner for one and didn't feel lonely. The afternoon I bought fresh flowers for the living room just because. The morning I caught myself humming while getting dressed for work. The evening I sat on the couch with a soft blanket and realized the quiet no longer hurt. The quiet had become mine. One Saturday morning, I stood in the doorway of my bedroom, soaking in the sunlight pouring across the hardwood floor. The air felt warm, gentle, almost forgiving. I took a deep breath, and for the first time since everything fell apart, the inhale didn't hurt. This wasn't healing in a triumphant sense. There was no grand moment of triumph, no cinematic monologue, no sweeping transformation. It was slow, steady, real. Healing was folding blankets and opening windows and blocking numbers. It was choosing boundaries without guilt. It was crying when needed and standing firm when warranted. It was acknowledging grief while refusing to drown in it. It was being alone and finding out that didn't scare me anymore. My life wasn't whole again, but it wasn't broken beyond repair. It was mine to rebuild, mine to redefine, mine to protect. And as I closed the bedroom door behind me, I felt something settle inside me, quiet and strong. A promise to myself to never again shrink so someone else could feel tall, to never again carry another person's chaos at the expense of my peace, to never again give access to people who prove they don't deserve it. The betrayal had destroyed everything I thought was stable. But maybe destruction wasn't the end. Maybe it was the clearing of a path I never would have taken otherwise. And as I stepped into the living room, sunlight warming my skin, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I wasn't just surviving. I was beginning.